What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved figures, a man who has spent decades turning personal tragedy into hope for millions, sits down for what should be a routine interview, and instead finds himself under attack from someone he considered a friend? What you're about to witness isn't just another uncomfortable celebrity moment. This is the story of how Whoopi Goldberg launched an unprovoked assault on Michael J. Fox that shocked the entire nation and revealed something dark and disturbing about the nature of celebrity, advocacy, and basic human decency. This is the moment that changed everything. This is the interview that went so catastrophically wrong that it made international headlines. This is a confrontation where America's sweetheart proved that even the kindest souls have their breaking point. And this is the day Whoopi Goldberg learned that some lines once crossed can never be uncrossed. The morning began with promise at the View Studios in New York City. Sunlight streamed through the iconic windows overlooking Manhattan, casting warm golden light across the familiar set. Production assistants moved through their well-rehearsed routines, adjusting camera angles and testing microphone levels with the practiced efficiency of people who had done this hundreds of times before. The energy in the building was positive, excited even. Michael J. Fox was scheduled to appear as a guest, and that was always cause for celebration. After decades in the public eye, after years of living openly with Parkinson's disease, after countless acts of advocacy and fundraising that had genuinely changed lives, Michael remained one of those rare celebrities that everyone loved. No scandals, no controversies, just a good man doing good work and trying to make a difference in the world. The audience filed in with their usual enthusiasm, their excitement heightened by the knowledge that they would soon see Michael in person. Many of them had grown up watching his movies, following his career from the early sitcom days through the blockbuster films, and into his later years as an advocate and author. Some of them were living with Parkinson's themselves, or caring for loved ones with the disease. They had come hoping to hear words of encouragement, to learn about the latest research breakthroughs, to feel connected to someone who understood their struggles. The makeup artists worked their magic backstage while Michael reviewed his talking points with his publicist. He planned to discuss his foundation's latest research initiatives, talk about his new memoir, and share some hopeful stories about patients who had benefited from new treatments. It was familiar territory for him, the kind of interview he had done countless times before, always with grace, always with that trademark humor and optimism that had become his hallmark. What neither Michael nor anyone else in the studio knew was that Whoopi Goldberg had arrived that morning in a peculiar mood. Those who worked closely with her might have recognized the signs, the tight set of her jaw, the distracted quality in her eyes, the way she sat at the table reviewing her notes with unusual intensity. But most people assumed it was just another day at The View where passionate discussions and lively debates were part of the show's DNA. When Michael finally made his entrance, the audience erupted in applause. He moved carefully but confidently across the set, that familiar smile lighting up his face as he waved the crowd. His movements carried the subtle tremors that had become part of his public persona, not hidden, not exaggerated, just there, a reality that he had long ago stopped trying to conceal. The other co-hosts rose to greet him with genuine warmth. Joy Behar beamed as she shook his hand. Sunny host smiled broadly. Sarah Haynes looked genuinely delighted to have him there. Alyssa Farrah Griffin nodded enthusiastically. Everyone seemed happy to have Michael on the show. Everyone except Whoopi. She barely looked up from her notes as Michael settled into the guest chair, offering only the briefest of acknowledgments. The other hosts exchanged quick glances, subtle but telling. Something was off. Those who knew Whoopi well, who had worked with her for years, recognized that this wasn't her typical pre-in focus. This was something else, something colder. Michael adjusted his microphone, still smiling at the audience, seemingly unaware that the trap had already been set. So, Michael, Whoopi began without preamble, her voice carrying an edge that immediately cut to the warm atmosphere like a knife through silk. You're here to talk about your foundation work, but I have to ask, don't you think it a bit convenient how you always seem to show up right when you need public sympathy? The words hung in the air like a grenade that hadn't yet exploded. The studio fell instantly, completely silent. The audience members who had been smiling moments before now sat frozen, unsure if they had heard correctly. The other hosts visibly stiffened in their seats, surprise evident on every face. Michael's smile faltered just for a second, just long enough for the cameras to catch the confusion crossing his features before he recovered with practiced grace. "I'm sorry, Whoopi," he said, his voice still friendly but now cautious. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean by that." Whoopi leaned forward in her chair, and there was no mistaking the aggression in her posture now. "Come on, Michael. Every time your career needs a boost, every time you have something to promote, suddenly we're all reminded about your condition. It's almost like you're using it as a crutch." The temperature in the studio dropped 20 degrees. Several audience members gasped audibly. Camera operators exchanged stunned glances, uncertain whether they should keep rolling or cut away. In the control room, producers were likely scrambling, trying to figure out if this was some kind of plan bit or their host had actually just accused Michael J. Fox of exploiting his own disease. Joy Behar immediately jumped in, her voice sharp with concern. "Whoopi, I think that's a bit harsh, don't you think?" But Whoopi wasn't backing down. If anything, she seemed emboldened by the shock her words had caused. "No, Joy, I think it's a fair question. We're all adults here." She turned back to Michael, her eyes hard. "Michael, you've made millions of dollars talking about Parkinson's disease. How do we know this isn't just another publicity stunt?" Michael's jaw tightened slightly, the only visible sign of his growing discomfort. But his voice remained steady, controlled, professional. "Whoopi, I've been living with Parkinson's for over 30 years. This isn't something I use for publicity. It's something I live with every single day. And if my openness about it helps other people or advances research, then I'm proud of that. But that's exactly my point," Whoopi shot back, her voice gaining strength, gaining certainty. "You've turned your disease into a brand. The Michael J. Fox Foundation, the books, the constant interviews. At what point does advocacy become exploitation?" The tension in the room was now impossible to ignore. It pressed down on everyone like a physical weight, making it hard to breathe, hard to think, hard to believe this was actually happening. Sunny Host tried desperately to redirect the conversation, to steer this runaway train back onto safer tracks. "Michael, why don't you tell us about the latest research breakthroughs your foundation has funded?" she suggested, her voice carrying a forced brightness. But before Michael could even open his mouth to respond, Whoopi interrupted again. "Let me guess," she said with bitter sarcasm. "More money needed, right? It's always more money needed." Michael took a visible breath, clearly working to maintain his composure, to keep his famous patience intact. "Actually, Whoopi, our foundation has funded over $800 million in research that has led to significant breakthroughs in treatment options. We've helped improve the lives of millions of people worldwide." "800 million?" Whoopi repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "And how much of that went to administrative costs? How much went to your salary?" The audience was beginning to shift uncomfortably in their seats now, confused murmurs rippling through the rows. This wasn't the feel-good interview they had expected. This was something else entirely, something darker, more disturbing. Michael looked directly at Whoopi, and for the first time, his voice carried a hint of steel beneath the politeness. "I don't take a salary from the foundation. Whoopi, every dollar I've put into this cause has come from my own pocket, or from generous donors who believe in the mission." Whoopi waved her hand dismissively, as if brushing away an annoying insect. "Right, and I'm sure that's all completely transparent and above board." The implication was clear, and it landed like a slap. Michael's face flushed slightly, but he maintained his composure with visible effort. Sarah Haynes, looking increasingly uncomfortable with each passing second, attempted to lighten the mood and redirect the conversation. "Michael, your memoir talks about finding hope in difficult circumstances. What message do you want to give to people who are facing their own health challenges?" Michael smiled gratefully at Sarah, clearly relieved to have a genuine question to answer. But before he could speak, Whoopi interjected once more, her voice now carrying a mocking tone that made several audience members wheeze. "Oh, here we go with the inspirational speech. Let me save everyone some time. It's probably something about never giving up and finding the silver lining, right?" The audience began to murmur more loudly now, their discomfort giving way to disapproval. This had crossed a line from tough questioning into something that felt like bullying. Michael took a deep breath, visible, gathering himself, and then did something unexpected. He looked directly into the camera, speaking past the host to the viewers at home. You know what? I came here today because I believe this was a platform where important conversations could happen. I thought we could discuss the real issues facing people with Parkinson's disease and their families. Important conversations, Whoopi laughed. And it was a harsh, bitter sound. Is that what we're calling sales pitches now? Michael's composure finally began to crack. Hairline fractures appearing in that famous patient's. Sales pitches. Whoopi, I'm trying to talk about people who are suffering, people who need hope, people who need research to find better treatments, and maybe even a cure someday. And you're the savior who's going to deliver that cure, right? Whoopi challenged, leaning back in her chair with her arms crossed. The Hollywood hero riding in to save the day. No, Michael said firmly, his voice growing stronger despite his trembling hands. I'm just someone who refuses to give up, and I'm someone who believes that when you have a platform, you should use it to help others. Joy Behar had heard enough. Her face was flushed with embarrassment and anger as she turned on her co-host. Whoopi, what is going on with you today? This is completely inappropriate. But Whoopi was just getting started, and everyone in the studio could feel it. She had passed some internal point of no return, committed to this attack in a way that suggested deeper motivations than anyone could quite understand. What's inappropriate, Joy, she said, her voice rising slightly, is when we don't ask the hard questions. What's inappropriate is when we let celebrities use our show as their personal fundraising platform without any scrutiny. Fundraising platform. Michael's voice rose slightly for the first time, anger beginning to color his words. Whoopi, I'm not here asking for money. I'm here talking about scientific research and trying to give hope to people who desperately need it. Hope? Whoopi scoffed, and the contempt in her voice was unmistakable. Hope doesn't pay the bills, Michael. Hope doesn't fund your lifestyle. The other co-hosts were now visibly agitated, exchanging shocked glances, silently communicating their disbelief at what they were witnessing. Sunny Ho spoke up forcefully, her voice carrying real anger now. Whoopi, you are completely out of line here. Michael is a guest on our show, and he deserves basic respect. Whoopi turned to Sunny with fire in her eyes. Respect? I'll show respect when our guests stop treating us like we're stupid. When they stop thinking they can come on here and manipulate our audience with sob stories and emotional manipulation. The words emotional manipulation seemed to echo in the studio. Michael stood up slowly, his hands trembling, whether from Parkinson's or from rage. It was impossible to tell. His voice, when he spoke, carried a weight of barely controlled emotion that made everyone in the room hold their breath. Emotional manipulation. Whoopi, I've shared my story because I thought it might help other people feel less alone. If that's manipulation to you, then I don't think we have anything else to discuss. Finally, Whoopi said with satisfaction, as if Michael had just proved her point. Some honesty. So, you admit you're here to manipulate our audience. That's not what I said, and you know it, Michael replied, his voice now carrying real anger, the famous patience completely worn through. What I said is that I share my story to help others. But clearly you've already made up your mind about me before I even sat down. The studio audience was now audibly uncomfortable, with several people calling out in support of Michael. Alyssa Farrah Griffin tried desperately to regain some semblance of control over the situation. Maybe we should take a commercial break and reset this conversation, she suggested weakly. No, Whoopi said firmly with the authority of someone who believed she was in complete control. I think our audience deserves to hear the truth. Michael, how much money have you personally made from your Parkinson's advocacy over the years? Michael stared at her in absolute disbelief, his mouth actually falling open slightly. I cannot believe you just asked me that question. It's a simple question, Whoopi pressed, her voice hard as stone. If you're such a selfless advocate, then you should have no problem answering it. The studio seemed to hold its collective breath, waiting for Michael's response. When he finally spoke, his voice was shaking with barely controlled emotion, each word carefully measured but carrying the weight of profound hurt and anger. The only thing I've gained from my advocacy, Whoopi, is the knowledge that I've helped other people. But apparently that concept is foreign to you. The words hung in the air like a challenge, like a gauntlet thrown down. Michael's statement, his suggestion that helping people was a foreign concept to Whoopi Goldberg, had clearly struck a nerve. Her face darkened instantly, all pretense of civility vanishing. The fake professional smile she had been wearing completely disappeared. Foreign to me? Whoopi's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. You think helping people is foreign to me? I've been fighting for causes since before you were even famous, Michael. I've been using my platform to advocate for real change while you were making millions playing pretend. This isn't about who's been advocating longer, Whoopi, Michael replied, still trying to keep his voice level despite his obvious anger. This is about treating people with basic human decency. Human decency? Whoopi laughed harshly, and the sound sent chills through everyone watching. You want to talk about human decency? Let's talk about how you show up to every major event, every gala, every fundraiser, making sure the cameras catch your tremors at just the right angle. That's not advocacy, Michael. That's performance art. The audience gasped audibly. Several people cried out in shock and dismay. Joy Behar looked like she desperately wanted to crawl under the table and disappear. This had gone far beyond uncomfortable television. This was cruelty, pure and simple, and everyone in the studio knew it. Whoopi, please stop this right now. Joy pleaded, her voice breaking slightly. But Whoopi was beyond listening to her co-hosts, beyond caring about the audience reaction, beyond any consideration except her apparent need to destroy the man sitting across from her. No, Joy, I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of watching celebrities exploit their personal struggles for profit and praise while real people suffer in silence. Michael's hands were shaking more noticeably now, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight of barely controlled emotion that made the words land with devastating impact. Real people suffer in silence. Whoopi, I am real people. Every person with Parkinson's is real people. We don't choose this disease, but we do choose how we respond to it. Oh, spare me the victim routine. Whoopi shot back with venom. You've never been a victim a day in your life. You've been privileged and protected and celebrated for every single struggle you've supposedly endured. Supposedly endured. Michael's voice cracked slightly, and for the first time, tears were visible in his eyes. Whoopi, do you think I'm faking this? Do you think I chose to have my body betray me? Do you think I wanted to lose control of my movements, my speech, my ability to do the work I love? I think you've made the best of the bad situation by turning it into a career. Whoopi replied coldly, each word precisely chosen to inflict maximum damage. And I think you convince yourself that makes you a hero. Sunny Host slammed her hand on the table with enough force to make everyone jump. Enough, Whoopi. This is cruel and it's wrong. Michael didn't come on our show to be attacked like this. Attacked? Whoopi turned her fury toward Sunny now, her voice rising. I'm asking legitimate questions that nobody else has the courage to ask. Why is everyone so afraid to hold celebrities accountable? Accountable for what? Sarah Haynes demanded, her normally gentle voice now sharp with anger. For having a disease? For trying to help other people with the same disease? What exactly are you trying to hold him accountable for? For profiting from suffering. Whoopi declared as if it were self-evident. For making millions of dollars talking about Parkinson's while there are people who can't afford their medications, who can't get proper care, who are struggling just to survive. Michael stood up again, this time with more force, his chair scraping against the floor. His voice, when it came, was powered by righteous anger and wounded dignity. You think I don't know about those people? You think I don't think about them every single day, Whoopi? The reason I do this work is because of those people. Every dollar our foundation raises, every bit of awareness we create, every research study we fund, it's all for those people. Your foundation will be emphasized mockingly. Your research, your awareness, it's all about you, isn't it, Michael? No, Michael said firmly, his voice gaining strength from his conviction. It's about finding better treatments. It's about finding a cure. It's about making sure that the people who come after me have better options than I had. Better options? Whoopi repeated with bitter sarcasm. Like what? Like becoming celebrity advocates? Like turning their diseases into brands? The studio audience was now actively booing Whoopi, but she seemed completely oblivious to their disapproval, lost in her own angry crusade. Michael looked out at the audience, then back at the co-hosts, most of whom were staring at Whoopi in absolute horror. "You know what, Whoopi?" Michael said, his voice gaining a new quality. Not just anger anymore, but something deeper, sadder, more profound. "I came here today hoping to have a conversation about hope, about research, about the amazing progress we've made in understanding Parkinson's disease. Instead, I find myself defending my right to exist as someone with a chronic illness." "Nobody's questioning your right to exist," Whoopi snapped. "I'm questioning your right to exploit that existence for personal gain." "Personal gain?" Michael's voice rose, and now there was no hiding the emotion. "Whoopi, do you know what my personal gain has been? I've gained the knowledge that my tremors will get worse. I've gained the certainty that my voice will continue to change. I've gained the understanding that every day will be a little bit harder than the one before. And you've gained millions of dollars in donations, book deals, speaking fees, and public sympathy." Whoopi countered without missing a beat. "Don't pretend like this hasn't been profitable for you." Alyssa Farrah Griffin tried one more time to intervene, her voice carrying a note of desperation. "Whoopi, we really need to change direction here. Our audience came to hear about Michael's important work, not to witness character assassination." "Character assassination?" Whoopi turned on Alyssa. "I'm the only one here willing to ask the hard questions. Everyone else is too star-struck to see what's really happening." Michael took a step closer to Whoopi's desk, and everyone in the studio could see the tremor in his hands, could see the emotion on his face, could feel the building storm. "What's really happening, Whoopi, is that you decided to attack a guest on your show for reasons I don't understand. What's really happening is that you're using your platform to spread cynicism and doubt about legitimate advocacy work." "Legitimate?" Whoopi stood up to face him. "You call it legitimate when you charge $50,000 for a speaking engagement about living with Parkinson's?" "I donate those fees to research," Michael replied quietly, with the simple dignity of someone stating an obvious truth. "Every single dollar." "According to who?" Whoopi challenged. "According to your publicist. According to your foundation's tax forms that nobody ever reads. According to truth," Michael said simply, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "But apparently you're not interested in the truth." "The truth?" Whoopi's voice was getting louder now, more aggressive. "The truth is that you've built an empire on the back of disease. The truth is that you convinced the world you're a saint when you're really just another Hollywood opportunist." The other co-hosts were now standing trying to physically get between Whoopi and Michael. Joy Behar was frantically signaling to producers, making desperate cutting motions across her throat. The audience was becoming increasingly vocal in their disapproval of Whoopi's behavior, with some people actually standing up and booing. "Opportunist," Michael repeated slowly, letting the word hang in the air. "Whoopi, if wanting to help other people makes me an opportunist, then I'll wear that label proudly. But I won't sit here and let you diminish the real struggles of millions of people with Parkinson's disease just because you decided to make me your target today." "Your target?" Whoopi laughed bitterly. "Michael, you made yourself a target the moment you decided to turn your personal struggle into a public commodity." "A commodity?" Michael's voice was now shaking with genuine anger, the famous composure completely shattered. "Whoopi, my struggle isn't a commodity. It's my life. It's my reality. And it's the reality of millions of other people who deserve better than to have their experiences dismissed as opportunism." "Dismissed?" Whoopi stepped around her desk, closing the distance between them. "I'm not dismissing anything. I'm exposing the truth about celebrity advocacy and how it really works." "The truth about celebrity advocacy," Michael said, his voice steady despite his trembling hands, "is that sometimes people with platforms use them to help others. But I guess that's a concept you can't understand." The tension had reached a critical point, a moment of no return. Whoopi's face was flushed with anger. Michael was visibly shaking. The other co-hosts looked like they were witnessing a car accident in slow motion, unable to stop it, but desperate to do something, anything, to end this nightmare. The studio audience was now openly calling for Whoopi to stop, their voices rising in a chorus of disapproval. The studio had become a powder keg, and everyone could sense it was about to explode completely. Michael looked directly into Whoopi's eyes, and when he spoke, his voice was steady, despite the tremor in his hands, despite the tears that threatened to fall, despite everything. Whoopi, I've spent 30 years trying to understand this disease. 30 years trying to help find treatments. 30 years trying to give hope to people who feel hopeless. If you can't see the value in that, then I genuinely feel sorry for you. You feel sorry for me. Whoopi's voice reached a new level of indignation. I don't need your pity, Michael. What I need is for celebrities to stop thinking they're saving the world when they're really just saving their careers. Saving my career? Michael shook his head in disbelief. Whoopi, Parkinson's disease ended my career. Everything I do now is despite this disease, not because of it. Oh, please. Whoopi waved her hand dismissively, as if brushing away his words like annoying insects. Your career was already over. Back to the Future was decades ago. This disease gave you a second act, a way to stay relevant, a way to keep the spotlight on you. The audience erupted in boos, so loud they nearly drowned out Whoopi's words. The sound was deafening, overwhelming, a tidal wave of disapproval. Joy Behar stood up and moved toward Whoopi, her face showing genuine alarm. That's enough, Whoopi. You need to stop this right now. But Whoopi was beyond reason now, beyond the reach of her co-host or the audience or anyone else. Stay relevant, she continued, her voice cutting through the noise. Let me tell you something about relevance, Michael. Real relevance comes from addressing systemic issues, not from making people feel good about individual struggles. Individual struggles. Michael's voice carried a new edge, sharp and cutting. Whoopi, there are 10 million people worldwide living with Parkinson's disease. Their struggles aren't individual, they're universal. Their need for better treatments isn't individual, it's urgent. 10 million people, Whoopi repeated sarcastically. And how many of them get to write best-selling books about their experience? How many of them get to appear on talk shows? How many of them get invited to galas and award ceremonies? You're right, Michael said quietly, and the sudden shift in his tone made everyone lean in. Most of them don't get those opportunities. That's exactly why I use mine to speak for them. To speak for them, Whoopi laughed coldly. Or to speak over them. To make sure your voice is the only one people hear when they think about Parkinson's disease. Sunny Host had heard enough. She stood up and faced Whoopi directly, her voice ringing with authority. Whoopi, as a co-host of this show, I'm telling you to stop. This is wrong. This is cruel. And this is not what The View stands for. Don't tell me what The View stands for. Whoopi snapped at Sunny, turning her anger on yet another target. The V stands for honest conversation, not celebrity worship. Honest conversation. Sarah Haynes joined Sunny in confronting Whoopi, the normally gentle host, now clearly furious. There's nothing honest about attacking a guest who came here in good faith to discuss important work. Michael raised his hand, a gesture asking for quiet. It's okay, he said, his voice carrying a strange calmness. Now, let her finish. I want to hear what else Whoopi has to say about people with Parkinson's disease. People with Parkinson's disease deserve better than false hope. Whoopi declared as if she were making some kind of profound statement. They deserve real solutions, not celebrity cheerleading. False hope? Michael's voice was incredulous. Whoopi, our foundation has funded research that led to new medications, new therapies, new surgical techniques. We've helped extend and improve the lives of countless people. If that's false hope to you, then what would real hope look like? Real hope, Whoopi said, warming to what she clearly believed was her strongest argument, would be addressing why healthcare is so expensive that people can't afford their medications. Real hope will be fighting for universal healthcare instead of charity fundraisers. You think I don't support universal healthcare? Michael asked, genuine confusion in his voice. You think advocacy for research and advocacy for policy can't coexist? Whoopi, we can fight for better treatments and better access at the same time. Can we? Whoopi challenged. Or does your celebrity advocacy actually make it easier for politicians to ignore systemic problems? Why fix healthcare when Michael J. Fox is raising money for research? The audience was now actively hostile toward Whoopi, with people shouting for her to apologize, to stop to do anything other than continue this cruel assault. Alyssa Farrah Griffin tried to address the audience. "Folks, let's please keep this respectful," she said weakly. But Whoopi turned toward the audience with fire in her eyes. "Respectful? You want me to be respectful to someone who's built a fortune on the back of human suffering? A fortune on human suffering." Michael's composure finally snapped completely, the careful control he'd maintained dissolving like paper in rain. "Whoopi, I've given away more money to Parkinson's research than most people will see in their lifetime. I've used every platform I've been given to advocate for better treatments and better care. If that's building a fortune on human suffering, then you have a very twisted view of what suffering actually looks like." Twisted? Whoopi stepped even closer to Michael. What's twisted is a system that celebrates celebrities for doing what should be the government's job. What's twisted is people like you getting praise for basic human decency, while real advocates get ignored. Real advocates. Michael's voice was now shaking with fury he could no longer contain. "Whoopi, I work with real advocates every day. Researchers, doctors, patients, caregivers. They don't seem to have a problem with celebrity advocacy. In fact, they welcome it because it brings attention and resources to their work. Of course they welcome it." Whoopi shot back. "You're bringing them money, but at what cost? At the cost of real systemic change, at the cost of meaningful reform." Joy Behar had moved to the producer's booth and was having an animated conversation with someone off camera. She returned to her seat, looking grim, almost frightened. "Whoopi, I've just been told that we need to wrap this segment immediately." "Wrap it?" Whoopi looked surprised. "We're just getting to the important part of the conversation." "The important part?" Michael looked at her in amazement. "Whoopi, what we've been having isn't a conversation. It's been a character assassination. You invited me here under false pretenses, and then spent the entire time attacking me personally." "False pretenses." Whoopi's voice reached a crescendo. "Michael, I invited you here to have an honest discussion about celebrity advocacy, and that's exactly what we've had." "No," Michael said firmly with absolute certainty. "What we've had is you making assumptions about my motivations, dismissing my work, and insulting millions of people who live with Parkinson's disease every day." The producers were now clearly visible in the background, making cutting motions across their throats, their faces showing genuine panic. Sunny Host looked directly into the camera, trying to salvage something from this disaster. "We're going to take a commercial break, and when we come back, we'll have a different segment." "Different segment?" Whoopi looked confused, as if she genuinely couldn't understand why anyone would want to end this. "We're not done here." "Yes, we are, Joy," Behar said firmly, her voice carrying real authority now. "Whoopi, this needs to end now." But Whoopi wasn't ready to let it go. She seemed incapable of stepping back from the precipice she created. She turned back to Michael one final time. "Michael, before you leave, I want you to look into that camera and tell our audience exactly how much money you've personally made from your Parkinson's advocacy over the past decade." Michael stared at her for a long moment, and everyone in the studio held their breath. Then he looked directly into the camera, speaking not to Whoopi, but to the millions watching at home. "I want to tell your audience that every person living with Parkinson's disease deserves respect, dignity, and hope. I want to tell them that research is making a difference, that treatments are improving, and that no one should ever be ashamed of their illness or their advocacy." "That's not what I asked," Whoopi pressed, seemingly unable to stop herself. "It's the only answer you're going to get," Michael replied with quiet dignity. He turned to the other co-hosts, and his voice softened slightly. "Joy, Sunny, Sarah, Alyssa, thank you for trying to maintain some semblance of professionalism during this ambush." "Ambush?" Whoop's voice was incredulous. "This wasn't an ambush. This was journalism." Michael looked at her one final time, and there was something almost like pity in his expression. Pity mixed with profound disappointment. "Whoopi, this wasn't journalism. This was something else entirely. And I think you know that the tension in the studio was now so thick it was almost suffocating. Security personnel had quietly positioned themselves near the set, ready to intervene if needed. The audience was restless, angry, confused. The co-hosts looked mortified, embarrassed to be associated with what had just happened, and Whoopi seemed completely oblivious to the chaos she had created to the damage she had done. "Fine," Whoopi said with finality, as if she were somehow the reasonable one in this situation. "If you can't handle tough questions, then maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews." Tough questions. Michael's laugh was bitter, devoid of any humor. "Whoopi, asking tough questions is part of good journalism. What you've done today isn't journalism. It's something much uglier." And then in a moment that no one in the studio would ever forget, Whoopi looked directly at the producers and said the words that would end the interview and define her legacy in the worst possible way. If Michael can't participate in an honest discussion about his advocacy work, then maybe he should leave. The studio fell completely, absolutely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Michael looked around at the shocked faces of the co-hosts, at the horrified expressions of the audience members, at the frantically signaling producers who were trying desperately to salvage something from this disaster. He nodded slowly, understanding now that there was nothing more to be gained by staying. He reached down and carefully removed his microphone, his trembling fingers working at the clip with visible difficulty. When he finally got it free, he stood up with as much dignity as he could muster. "You're absolutely right, Whoopi," he said quietly, his voice carrying throughout the silent studio. "I should leave, but not because I can't handle tough questions. I should leave because this isn't the kind of conversation that helps anyone. This isn't advocacy or journalism or honest discussion. This is just cruelty, and I won't participate in cruelty." As Michael began walking toward the exit, something extraordinary happened. The audience began to applaud. It started slowly, just a few people at first, uncertain if it was appropriate. But then it built, growing louder and stronger, until it became a thunderous ovation that filled the entire studio, a wall of sound that seemed to shake the very walls. People stood as he passed, some reaching out to touch his hand, others with tears streaming down their faces. The applause wasn't just support for Michael. It was condemnation of what they had witnessed, a collective rejection of the cruelty that had been displayed on that stage. Whoopi sat in her chair, arms crossed, watching him leave with a satisfied expression that suggested she believed she had won some kind of victory, that she had struck some blow for truth and honesty. But as the applause continued and grew even louder, as the other co-hosts sat in stunned silence, refusing to look at her, it became increasingly clear that the only thing Whoopi had won was the distinction of having conducted one of the most controversial, most widely criticized, most fundamentally cruel interviews in The View's history. Michael reached the edge of the set and paused, turning back one final time. He didn't say anything he didn't need to. His face said everything that needed to be said. Then he walked through the exit, and the door closed behind him with a quiet click that somehow echoed like a gunshot in the emotionally charged studio. The cameras finally cut to commercial, but the damage had been done. The moment was captured, preserved forever in high definition for anyone who wanted to see what happens when cruelty meets kindness, when cynicism confronts hope, when someone who has dedicated their life to helping others is attacked by someone who should have known better. What started as a routine promotional interview had become something else entirely, a moment that would be analyzed, debated, and discussed for years to come. A demonstration of grace under pressure, of dignity in the face of cruelty, of the quiet strength it takes to walk away from a fight you never wanted or deserved. The question that lingered in that studio that dominated social media and news coverage for weeks afterward was painfully simple. What had Whoopi been thinking? What had motivated such an unprovoked attack on one of the most beloved figures in entertainment? And perhaps most troubling of all, had she revealed something dark about celebrity culture? Or had she simply revealed something dark about herself? Whatever the answers, one thing was absolutely certain. Nobody who witnessed that moment would ever forget it. And Michael J. Fox, who had faced his devastating diagnosis with grace, who had turned personal tragedy into hope for millions, who had spent decades trying to make the world a better place, had once again shown the world what real courage looks like. Not the courage to attack, not the courage to tear others down, but the courage to walk away from cruelty with your dignity intact, your principles uncompromised, and your humanity fully intact.